Hi guys, it's Rashonda. I'm the creator of this YouTube channel as well as the artbyro.com blog where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials. In today's video, we're going to be looking at how I did the word evil. That was part of a drawing challenge that we do in the Facebook group. And you can find the link to the group in the description box. While you're in there, check out the links to our free graffiti drawing guide for beginners. And we also have a graffiti course, which is called Your Graffiti Art, which teaches you to draw graffiti art in your unique style. So let's go ahead and go on over to the art studio and take a look at how we did today's drawing. Okay, so today we're going to work on a graffiti art drawing doing the word evil. And this is a drawing prompt from the Facebook group. These go out every week just to give everyone some ideas of something to draw if they're struggling. So I have my supplies that I'm going to be using. I have my mechanical pencil that I like. This is my preferred eraser when I'm doing my actual drawings. I love this eraser. But I'm going to sketch it out with, I'm going to turn this a little bit. I'm going to sketch it out with a coal erase pencil. The reason for this is because the regular graphite pencil, if you brush across it, will smear, and these don't smear. So I like using these when I'm sketching out my graffiti art because I like that I don't have to worry about smudges and then there's just less to clean up. But these will still erase. It's an erasable colored pencil, which is nice. So I'm going to sketch it out with this. Again, the word is going to be evil. And I'm going to take a little bit different approach on this. So the way that I explain what graffiti art is not the typical what you would see in actual graffiti. Graffiti art is just a combination of lettering and images. So you'll typically have your nice lettering art and then some kind of images or designs in the background to make a cohesive piece. So the first thing I do is think about the word itself. So evil, which is 4 letters. I want to keep in mind where my center point is of my paper. And I like to use a lot of guidelines because it's a lot less intimidating and then you won't psych yourself out. So if you're a hobby artist like I am, and you do your drawings as a way to relax and just for the enjoyment of it, which I do sometimes give my artwork away to people as gifts, but what I don't do is I really don't try to sell it. I have no desire to try selling my art. So that's just really the basic difference between what you would classify as an artist compared to a hobby artist is just that a hobby artist isn't as interested in selling their artwork as just creating the artwork for their own personal enjoyment. I find drawing very relaxing, so that's why I do it. But at any rate, this is a good drawing, a method to do for coming up with ideas, trying to find things to draw, is just to start out with a word. And today we're going to do evil, and then you can do whatever you want for the background. They can be abstract, you can just have some colors back there. It really doesn't matter. And the other thing is that you can do it in any style that you want, which is really great because you can kind of put your own spin on it, your own little personal touch. And that's what I wanted to illustrate with this drawing specifically, is that the word's evil, but I want to take a little bit different approach on it. And this is just going to be a quick, fun drawing, nothing real crazy. I'm not going to plan it out a lot ahead of time. I'm going to adjust this angle a bit again. I'm going to do more of a block letter style. And if you're not real comfortable with doing lettering, there's a lot of references that you can Google it and find out, you know, what you like, what you don't like, and kind of work on developing your own style for your art. So what you can do is, if you want to put like a little bit of an arch to your lettering, and I want to leave some space because I want to add some images in there. So I know I'm going to have 2 letters on this side and 2 letters on this side. And you can start with any letter you want to start with. It doesn't matter. You don't have to start at the beginning. I typically will start towards the middle just because it helps me get a little bit more of an idea of where everything's going to land. And what you can do is just lay out the letters like you would draw or write out a word. And hopefully you can see this. So if you can see, this purple's not real dark to show up on the camera, but as I draw it out, it'll get easier to see too. So, but write it out just like you would write out just your regular letters, just a single line, to give yourself an idea of where the letters are going to land. And you can make some adjustments if you need to. If you need to make adjustments, I would use just like a regular block eraser. Works a little bit better, but you want your letters kind of close together and have them overlap a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start with blocking out the letter E. And even though this word is evil, I had thought about doing like maybe some bone lettering or some like slime dripping or something like that. And then I decided I kind of just really felt like taking a different type of approach to it. So I felt like it would be better for the mood that I'm in to just stick with a regular block letter instead of trying to do something like real, like Halloween style to fit with what you would typically see with evil. And I also wanted to do this, and the reason why I'm making the video of it is because I just wanted to illustrate how you can take a word and do whatever you want with it. It doesn't have to be what people would expect, which is the really cool thing about art, is that you can do whatever you want. You can make it your own, which means you can do it any style you want to do it. So I'm doing just kind of a basic block letter, but with a little more of a flair on it. And hopefully you can see how I'm drawing through the other letters. I want this E to be in front of the V, but I still draw the V all the way through so I can make sure my lines connect the way they're supposed to and nothing looks too funky. So I'm just going to work my way through all the letters. I have my E, my V. I'm going to make my I. And there's so many different ways you can make the letter I. You can do uppercase, you can do lowercase, you could do a combination of upper and lowercase with your letters. And part of that is going to be whatever you prefer, whatever you think looks right. And all these things go into what ends up being your artistic style, which your style is different from everybody else's style. It's unique to you. And whatever you decide looks right, that's going to help create your style. So I made the top of my eye rounded, and maybe when you're doing yours, you would rather have it squared because the rest of the letters are squared. All that comes into play when you're developing your style and doing things that kind of become your signature look. And don't worry if you feel like you don't really have a style yet. That will come just through practice. And really, your style will always evolve. So unless you're really knocking out a lot of artwork, you're developing your style consistently all the time every time you're working on something. So if you're just kind of dabbling, if you're more of a hobby artist, it might take you a while to really land on any particular style. So don't worry about it too much, but I mean, that's really all your artistic style is just what you prefer, what you like, what you don't like. So I think you guys can see that okay on the camera. So again, what I really wanted to illustrate here was that you can make your art in whatever style, whatever the design you want to use. Don't feel like you're stuck in a box and that if you're doing something like evil that the lettering has to look real creepy and crazy. And I got some ideas for what I want to do for the background as well. So this is the start of it. The next thing is going to be, we can either start doing the outline of the lettering or sketch out the entire drawing first and then go back over everything and outline it and color it. Oftentimes I'll just do the lettering separate and get it all finished and then start working on my background just to kind of have a little bit of momentum going. So that's it for the sketch of the lettering, and then we'll figure out where to go from here next. So the next thing I want to do is outline my lettering. And typically I'll use a smaller pen to do my outlining. I should have pulled it out here. So I'll use something like this. That's kind of a smaller tip. The reason I typically use a pen instead of a marker to do my outlining is just because I find it very relaxing. You have to go over it multiple times to get the thickness that you want. So that's why I will normally use an outlining pen. But one of my goals is to get out of my comfort zone and try new things. So in order to do that, you have to do something you don't typically do that isn't part of your normal routine, because growth happens outside of your comfort zone. Growth doesn't happen when you're comfortable. So I'm going to use just a regular, a black Bic marker to do my outlining for my lettering. And part of my style is that I will typically outline in black, and I like my outlines to be more bold, which is just part of what my style is. So when you're doing your lettering, the way you find what your style is by doing your own thing and doing whatever it is that you think looks right to you. So I've mentioned it before, and you'll hear me mention it over and over again. The really awesome thing about creating art is that there's really no right or wrong way to do it. And you can't let other people tell you what you should do or what you shouldn't do. I can show you how I do my work with the purpose of encouraging you and inspiring you to do your own. But I can't tell you how you should do it. I can't tell you what the right or wrong choices are. You need to do things the way you feel is good. So an example would be if I'm doing this lettering, I'm doing my outline, and you're thinking, you think that this would look a lot better if it was outlined in blue, or if it was outlined with a thinner line. If those are your thoughts, then that's an indication of your style and what you should be doing in your own artwork. I don't do these step-by-step tutorials with the intention of you to directly copy what I'm doing. If you don't know what your style is, you don't know what you like or don't like, then by all means, go ahead and just directly copy what I'm doing, or if there's somebody else you follow. Copying other people's artwork is fine, as long as you're not duplicating somebody else's work and trying to pawn it off as your own, Or like you don't want to do somebody else's work, copy something that somebody else did and then try to sell it and say it's an original work of art. But to copy it for your own purposes of trying to discover your style or just to practice is perfectly okay. Just don't ever try to pretend it's something that you did that's your own original unique work of art. But if you're working on developing your style and you're not quite sure, then you can feel free to just copy until you figure it out. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit darker, a thicker line. And I'm going to do this sort of like a drop shadow, but not really, but kind of along that same idea. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to do the right side and the bottom on everything and just darken it up. And the reason that it's a little bit different from a drop shadow is that typically if you're doing a drop shadow, it wouldn't go all the way up even with the top, and I don't care about that. I'm not too worried about it. And when I do this, I'm going to go right over top of whatever letters are getting covered up. Like I went right over top of that I. And as you can see, I have this, I don't know what you call it, like a blotter underneath. It's actually a foam placemat that I got at, I don't know, Bed Bath & Beyond or something. It's smooth. Some of them have texture. You can't use something with texture, but it makes a nice soft surface. And I use it because I don't want to get marker on my drawing table, is the main purpose that I'm using it for. So I can go right to the edges. I don't have to worry about it. So again, I'm doing the bottom and I'm doing the right sides. So when you do a shape that is circular, just go like narrow it as you go up towards the top. You don't want this whole side to be really wide, because up here you're getting into what would be considered the top of the shape. And of course, you can use artistic liberty and do whatever you want. If you were doing this and went all the way up, it's not going to ruin your art by any means. Like I said, you can break the rules with art. There are some rules as far as things like shadows and perspective and stuff like that, but I do most of my work freehand. Even when I do perspective, I don't like using vanishing points and rulers. It just feels way too tedious to me. So I just kind of eyeball everything because, like I said earlier, if you're a hobby artist and you're doing your artwork just for the purpose of relaxing, then do whatever you need to do to make it more relaxing. And if that means going outside of what would be considered the rules, so to speak, then do it. So that's it for the lettering. I don't think I want to use this thick of a marker to outline the other stuff. I think I'm going to go to my outlining pen and outline the Elmira character and this little skull bow thing over here. And then after that, the next step would be to color, add the color to it. So I'm going to grab my other marker and I'll be back. All right, so now I have my outlining pen, and a lot of times I'll just use these Sharpie pens. I don't know why. I like them. Sometimes they tend to smear and sometimes they don't, and I'm not entirely sure why. I never really cared enough, I guess, to research it and figure it out, but they work pretty well. I typically don't like Sharpie markers in general. Only because they're regular markers. The black ones tend to yellow, which obviously you don't want. And I don't like the smell. I'm sensitive to smell. And I don't know what the difference is, but the Sharpie markers have a really strong smell. To me anyway, I notice it. But the big markers have almost no scent at all. So I'm not sure. They're both alcohol-based markers. I don't know what the difference is. Looking for this other marker. So like these markers I have, but I typically don't use them for my artwork. Same thing with like this fine point. I don't use, but these outlining pens don't have an odor to them. So normally I'll use these. And one thing I wanted to mention is that if you have like where your drawing comes off the paper, I learned a long time ago not to stress out about everything coming out perfect. I mean, sometimes you try to plan it all out and you sketch it out, and if something, like I'm not going to worry that her cheek isn't all the way completely on the paper. To me, that's not really a huge deal. I don't see where it would hurt anything. If that's something that bothers you, then by all means, pay more attention to that. And, you know, if something doesn't line up the way you want it to line up, then you can erase it and start over. Like I said, if that bothers you, then pay attention to those things and make them right to whatever feels right for you. It doesn't bother me. It used to. And then I realized that for a lot of things, it looks a little bit more interesting if it's not completely on the paper. There was an artist I was following for a little bit on YouTube before he switched to doing everything digital. And he did a lot of drawings where he cropped the image and offset it and had a lot of white space off to one side, and I realized I kind of liked how that looked. It was different from, like, I used to center everything and try to get it as much in the center as possible, which as far as composition goes is bad. It's not very interesting to look at. So after following this particular artist and realizing that everything doesn't have to be perfect and sometimes it looks a little better if it's not, I kind of let go of this idea of everything has to be even and centered and perfect and fit just right. And so that's one of those things that comes back to, if you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment, you need to figure out what are the things that really need to matter and what doesn't. So again, that's your personal choice. If this doesn't bother me, but it drives you nuts, then you should do something with it and fix it and not leave it that way. And I apologize if it's giving you some kind of fits watching me draw things that are intentionally left not completely perfect. I know for some people it kicks in their OCD or whatever you want to call it, and I understand that for some people it can drive you a little nuts seeing something like that, but it is what it is. It doesn't bother me. I'm leaving it. But again, it's like I said, if it's a personal preference, if that's something that bothers you and you want everything to fit just so, and you want things to be even and perfect, then if that's what works for you, then that's what works for you. Part of that is developing your personal style, and part of it is also just whatever works for you as an artist. We all have our reasons for why we're creating art. And I had mentioned earlier that I really don't have any desire to sell my work. It's not something that I really care about. I do it for myself. I'm not really into wanting to be famous and have people having my artwork hanging on their walls. So depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. If you want to be an illustrator, just as an example, then you'll probably want to pay a little bit better attention to things like that. Making things look more centered and perfect or whatever, depending on what it is you're trying to market. But for me, it doesn't matter. I'm doing this because I enjoy making these. I find it relaxing. There's something about using these outlining pens that I find extremely therapeutic, and I don't know what it is. I don't get that same sensation with the markers. Even like filling in colors or anything like that, I don't get that same feeling. I don't really know what it is. I've never identified what it is about using the markers or using the outliner pen. There's just something about it that I find very, very soothing. I really don't know what it is, but I like it. It works for me. So I have the skull, the little skull bow, and I'm trying to decide if I think it would look better thinner like this is, or a little wider of an outline. I'm not really sure. I might go ahead and do it with the thinner one and then kind of go from there and see. I kind of feel like maybe this main skull part of it should be a little wider. But as far as the line width should be, the line weight should be a little heavier maybe. I'm not sure. These are all, they're just decisions you have to make. Creating art is all about problem solving and just making decisions. And you can do it as you go. You can make something, sit back, maybe wait a day, come back to it and see what it looks like and how it feels to you. Another option would have been, instead of outlining this in black, I could have outlined it in a different color, maybe a blue or a green or something would have been an option. Even though the skulls are typically your black, whites, and grays. We don't have to stick with that. We could do different colors. We can do whatever we want. It's our artwork. Do what we want to do. I don't want this bow thing to be too detailed, but I think the outline, the line weight, needs to be somewhere between what hers looks like and what these lettering look like. So I think I'm going to ponder on that for a minute, and when I decide, I'll come back. So I did a little bit off camera. I outlined the skull a little bit more, made it a little bit of a wider line. I added in this back part of her hair, which I somehow overlooked when I was sketching it out. So I finished up drawing her hair. And then I added the black for the shoes and the eyes. And then I cleaned up the eraser marks. But what I wanted to get on here to show you, I know you guys know how to erase, but when you're trying to get rid of all these lines, so some of these are a little more stubborn than the others, and it'll probably be okay. Most of it will cover up anyway. But one thing is, when you're using these big erasers, is that you want to make sure you're holding down, putting pressure on your paper, especially by the edges. And when you're getting these harder areas to remove, make sure you're pressing down really hard on your paper, even with the cardstock, because what'll happen is you'll grab your paper with the eraser and it'll wrinkle it up. And it can make you feel like you ruined it, or at the very least, you're going to have a mark where the wrinkle is at in your artwork, and nobody wants that. So I just wanted to make a note to you that, especially if you're not used to working like this, that even this is on cardstock, and I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning or not, but I just took a normal piece of cardstock and cut it in half. I've been trying to work a little bit smaller, either using artist trading cards for stuff or just doing these half sheets for the graffiti art, just to save time. I have a habit of not finishing things, you know, starting something and then losing interest or going on to something else or whatever the case may be. But I have a lifelong habit of not finishing things. So one of my goals in life in general is to finish what I start. So I've gotten in this habit of working a little bit smaller so that I don't get tired of it or overwhelmed and give up on it. So this is just a half sheet of just regular white cardstock. But yeah, so even the cardstock will bunch up and wrinkle if you're not holding it down. But, you know, you need to put a little bit of pressure on there. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go pick out my colors. And I think what I'm going to do with this one, since she needs to be a specific colors. Normally I like starting with the lettering. I don't know why. It doesn't really matter. You can start wherever you want, but typically my normal method is to start with the lettering and then do the background. But I also don't typically do characters. I have in the past. I don't do them very often, but since she needs to be specific colors, I think I'm going to go ahead and pull the colors that I want for her and then look at those and then do the lettering. And probably what I'll do is that since her colors are, her hair's orange and then her dress and her bow is a teal color, like a turquoise teal color. So I think since the hair's orange, but the colors are going to be cool colors, I might do this in warm colors. But I'm going to think about that. I'm going to go ahead and pull the markers. And what I do, because I have quite a few different markers, is I have these leftover pieces from when I cut my artist trading cards. There's a little bit left over. So what I do is I have pieces of scrap cardstock that I just cut down kind of small. And then I can test my colors. So like that would probably be a pretty good color for the color of her dress, is similar to that. And then typically what I'll do also is, I don't know how well you can see it on here, but I'll use a lighter color and a darker color and lay down the lighter and then go over top of it with the darker where there might be shadows at, to kind of break it up a little bit and make it have a little bit more depth. So I'm going to jump off camera real quick, go pull some markers, and then I will be back when I do the actual coloring. All right, we are ready to add color to the drawing. So what I did was I pulled out the colors that I need for the Elmira character, all the different colors that I want to use for her. And the way I work is that I like to use at least 2 colors for each section of the drawing. So for her hair, I got 2 different markers. And what I did to try these out was just use a scrap piece of cardstock and blend the different colors together and see how they look. Try some different ones till you find the ones that you're comfortable with, the ones that you think will fit with your drawing. And this is just, I get these little scraps when I cut out my sheets of cardstock for my artist trading cards, and then I just keep these little pieces to use for that. So I have my 2 colors for her dress, which are also the same color as the bow. I have the 2 skin colors, and then I have a gray marker for some shading on the white. So I just have 1 gray that I pulled out. I'll probably use it on the skull instead of leaving the skull just plain white. So typically the markers that I've used in the past are these touch markers that I really like. These markers, however, they're ones, and I don't know where they came from. I think maybe a craft store or something, but my boss got me a set of markers because she knows that I do a lot of drawings with markers. And she got them because I think she thought they were something different. But they're not typically what I would use. I don't buy high-end markers. I normally don't get, like, I won't get the Copic markers because they're too expensive. And to me, I'm not an illustrator, so I kind of feel like it's a little overkill for what I do, and it doesn't justify the cost. I bought a couple individual colors just to try them out years ago when I was first getting markers and trying to figure out what I wanted to use. And I think I paid like $6 a marker for it. And to be honest, I wasn't that impressed. Not for what I'm doing. I know a lot of people swear by them. And I think if you're an illustrator or if you're doing higher end art and stuff that you're selling, it probably matters. But like I said earlier, I'm just a hobby artist. I'm not trying to sell my work. I don't need something that is gonna last forever and I gotta worry about the longevity of it or anything like that. And I really haven't noticed any problems with the markers that I use. I use a lot of Bic markers. I like those. They're cheap. You can get packs of them. I'm kind of trying to find something to replace those. The Bic markers, I do recommend using them if you're just starting out, mostly because they're inexpensive. You can buy a set of them and you get a decent range of colors. And you can pick them up at any store. You can get them at, like, I got my first set from the grocery store when I decided I wanted to try using markers, and I was at the store getting my weekly groceries and seen them and decided it was time to give them a go and just picked them up. The thing I don't like about the Bic markers is that, at least I haven't been able to find them in just the individual colors. Because what happens when you buy them by the set, you end up using certain colors more than others. And then the only way to get another one if it runs out is to buy a whole nother set again. So then you have a surplus of the colors that don't get used as often, and you run out of the ones that you need. And if you're in the middle of a drawing and you run out, you kind of need to have that same color unless you can find a substitute and maybe cover up that original color, like go darker or something. But that's the only reason I don't like the Bic markers. And for some of them, it's hard to find colors that will blend. So as you can see, I'm going back and forth with these, and you don't have to worry about the marker transferring over it. It won't pick up that other color. But all this to say, yeah, these aren't something that I would necessarily recommend. Only because the cheaper, like, they're more like a kid grade, a student grade art supplies. They're typically not the greatest. But as far as markers go, if you want to do these gradations of colors and to blend your colors together, you need to make sure they're alcohol-based markers. Like Crayola markers are not. Those are, I think they're water-based. A lot of the permanent markers are alcohol-based. There's some that are not, but I think typically a lot of them are. The reason I like them is because you can blend the colors together and make some nice lights and darks. So like right now you can see, I think you can see this where there's that hard edge right there. So if I go back over with my lighter color, I can smooth that out so the colors are blended together. But you do need to work while the markers are still wet, or they won't blend together. And you can just kind of go back and forth with them until you get the look you want. And if you're not used to doing this, I wouldn't stress out about it a whole lot. Just get in the habit of using a couple different markers. And you can do yours differently. You can play around with blending the colors. This is just how I work. This is the way I like to work. This is what relaxes me. It gives me the look I'm after, which might be different for you. So if you're interested in trying to get a different kind of look, then by all means, you should definitely be exploring that and seeing what you can come up with. So I'm just going to keep working through this. A lot of times I'll take this lighter color, and even though I know I'm going to be covering up with the darker color, I'll lay down an entire layer of the lighter. The reason I do that is, number one, it changes how your colors look. If you just put the dark color down, it's not going to look the same as if you layer it. But also, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to change how you want your colors to look. And these are small areas, so I don't feel like I'm wasting a lot of markers doing it. So what I look for in my markers, there's really only a couple things. I don't like anything that has a real strong odor. And I have a lot of different brands of markers that I've tried. And really the Sharpie markers are the only ones that I've noticed have a super strong odor to them. So I tend to not use the Sharpie. I don't really care for them anyway. Most of the other markers, the odor's very slight. It doesn't bother me, so I don't mind if it has a slight odor, but there's something, I don't know what it is with the Sharpie markers, but I personally don't prefer them. They don't have a very good range of colors. Of course, they're not really intended to do a lot of artwork, I don't think. To be honest, I don't know what their market is, but I feel like it's more of a office supplies than art. But that's the only reason I don't like Sharpies. I think you should try your own different brands. But anyway, so what I look for in markers, I want them to be able to blend. So I want them to be the alcohol-based markers. Price for sure. I don't want to spend a ton of money on art supplies, because the thing with markers is that you can get by with a smaller quantity, but you find that you very quickly keep adding because you need a color you don't have, a different shade of green or blue or whatever it might be. So, and then also they run out, so you have to keep replacing them. So cost is something I look at. That's not the most important thing, but I don't want to get a really, really cheap marker just because it's cheap. But I don't care about getting the top of the line. I'm not somebody who feels like something has to be really expensive for it to be good or to suit my needs. It's more about what my needs are than anything. And so I don't need a super expensive marker. So cost, I want them to be alcohol based so I can blend them. Another big one, which I touched on earlier, is to be able to buy them in individual colors. And that's a little more difficult to do. So I'm starting to play around with some different brands. Like I said, I've been using the Bic markers and recommending them for a while. but I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated with the lack of availability of individual colors. And yeah, they're inexpensive, but if you have to keep buying full sets of markers because you run out of one color, then that's not cost effective to do that. So I'm currently testing out some different markers to see. I do like these touch markers. There seems to be two different ones. So this is, I got these a long time ago, and they say Shinhan Art. And then, I don't know, I probably can't find one right now, but there's these other markers. I don't know where they're at. I have some other ones that say touch, but they don't have the Shinhan, and they're a lot cheaper. You can get them off of Amazon. But what I noticed about those is that they run out really fast. They dry up. So you want your markers to last a little bit. You don't want them to be drying up and needing to be replaced all the time. And I've actually purchased some different markers, or I was getting Sketchbox for a while, and they came with some markers, and I just put them off to the side, and I played around with them when I first got them, and then I just put them in with my regular supply of markers. And I went to use one not too long ago, and it was completely dried out. It wasn't usable at all. So I think there might be a couple different companies making the touch markers, is what I suspect. I don't really know, but I liked using those for quite a while because you could get them in just individual colors. So if you needed to get a color because one ran out, or if you wanted to try a different shade, you could just keep adding to your supply. And a lot of these markers, so let's see, I quit teaching in the classroom about maybe 11 years ago. 11 years ago. That's how long it's been since I was really doing a lot of the graffiti art, because I was doing them for my students and giving them away to my students. And so these markers have been just sitting for at least 10 years. And a lot of them are still perfectly fine. I can still use them. But these other touch markers that I got within the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years maybe, and hadn't really been used at all, and they were completely dried up and I couldn't use them. So I've tried these Prismacolor, were one of the first nicer sets that I got. These I didn't care for because, I should show you this. So I use this narrow tip, the bullet tip, a lot, but most of them are dual tipped and they have a wider tip on the other end, which is really nice. So that would be another thing you would want to look for in a marker. But these Prismacolor, they have the wide end, which is fine, but then the other end is this little tiny, like, needlepoint fine tip. But what I also noticed, like this, if it even works, it doesn't cover very much area. It just makes like one thin line, but it's always dry. And the other side will work fine, but the fine point, and you really can't even use it, and it's kind of pointless anyway. It's not big enough to do anything. So, but I think Prismacolor changed their markers since then. I think they have different tips on them now, different nibs. But I haven't tried them. I don't really go that expensive, and I don't know if the prices come down or if my opinion of the price has changed. I haven't really looked because I just feel like there's some other brands out there that I feel like I've gotten more comfortable using and I like a little bit better. So I haven't really needed to look into the Prismacolor again. I think at the time, Prismacolor was one of the only companies that I was familiar with that had more of a artist grade quality. Like I said, I was teaching in the classroom at the time, and I was a lot more familiar with student supplies than I was with professional artist supplies. I am trying out Arteza I just bought. I just bought a set of gray markers yesterday, so I'm going to try those out. I know they have, I don't know if all the colors are available, but I know they have some colors available as individual stock, so I want to give that a try. So I'm just working small sections at a time because, again, you want to keep the marker wet. You don't want the alcohol to evaporate out if you're blending your colors together, because you need to go back over. And it's just a back and forth between the lighter color, excuse me, the lighter color, the darker color, and then you go back over it with the lighter color to blend it in. So it's just back and forth with that. And then the way I'm doing my shading is not accurate if I want to go for any type of realism, but I'm also not trying to think about it that much. I'm not too concerned with where I'm putting my shadows in. I'm not considering a light source for this kind of work. You could if you wanted to be more technical with your drawings. Mostly what I'm doing is just trying to break up the solid chunks of color. It's somewhat arbitrary. I just don't want all these solid areas of color. I could add some gray into her eyes if I wanted to break them up a little bit, but I'll probably just leave those. And you could use a color other than gray. You could come in here with some blues or purples. That would probably look nice. But I'm just trying to break up these solid areas. I think it makes them look a little bit better. Again, that's just something that's part of my style. That's what I like. That's what works for me. Like I said, you could consider a light source and do your shading all proper and technical, but that isn't fun for me. I just like going in. Like I've mentioned many times, I do this for relaxation. And if I'm getting too technical, I probably wouldn't be very motivated to work on it because it just takes the relaxation out of it. So, and then I'm using this chisel tip. Make sure you can see this. I'm using this chisel tip to fill in these big chunks of area. The chisel tip's not too bad. It's a little harder to get in. It's definitely quicker if you can control where it's going and keep it in the lines. The other thing I should mention with using markers is if you get the streaks, you can go back over and try to blend that in a little bit better. But as you layer the colors, it'll keep getting darker, so you need to keep that in mind. And this has, you can get this wider stroke, or you can tilt it and use the edge of the tip and get in a little tighter. So even though I know I'm going to do this entire bow the same way on this other side of it, I'm going to switch to my darker marker, and I want to come in here with the shadows and break it up a little bit. You have a little bit of time. The markers will stay damp for a little bit. That alcohol doesn't evaporate. You can touch it and feel. It'll feel kind of cold. Like these areas are starting to dry. And then that, I'm assuming, would depend on the marker as well, how much time you have. typically when I'm working, this would not be evaporated yet. And you can only tell, well, I can tell because it feels, to me, it feels wet when you touch it, and this doesn't feel wet at all. So I don't know. I would assume the different brands, that flash time or whatever it would be called, is probably different depending on the brand. I don't really know, I'm speculating, but I would assume that they dry out and evaporate it at slightly different rates. I don't think it would be a huge difference, but like I said, I don't really know. If you work back and forth with your colors, you're going to have plenty of time. They're not going to dry out within a few seconds. It's going to take a little bit. I'm just doing this. You can kind of look at it and see if I want to darken this whole thing up, I can go back over it with the lighter color and it'll make the whole thing darker. Another thing you can do, especially on the bigger areas, is to use 3 different markers instead of just 2. And then you can have your light, your midtones, and your darks, which adds another level to the depth of it. But those smaller areas are sometimes difficult. And the other thing, sorry if I go off camera, I forget to check sometimes. The other thing is that depending on what markers you're using, you might not have 3 colors that blend good together, or that might not be the look that you're going for. If you want your drawings to look more flat, solid, without the gradation of color and without the shadowing, then if that's what works for your style, then you should do that. But the one thing that I found is that a lot of times when people are just starting out on their art journey, and people who are just learning to use a new medium, one of the things that they seem to get frustrated with, that I notice is fairly common, is that a lot of people complain that their drawings look too flat. They look flat and boring. And the easiest way to get away from that without getting super technical and learning shadows and all that is to just use a couple colors, break up those big areas, add some lights and darks. And like I said, it's kind of just randomly selecting areas. I do try to think about, like, this is the inside of the bow. So the inside of the bow would have darker areas because there would be a shadow. Same thing like around the edge of the neck, so there would be a shadow. There'd be a shadow here from the chin. Like, you do want to consider some of those things so it doesn't, you don't want your artwork to look off. Sometimes we can look at something and it just doesn't look right. Even if you can't pinpoint what it is, your brain knows that something doesn't look quite right. So you want to know the basic principles of art. Even if you're a hobby artist, it's good to know, like, the elements of art and some of the basic stuff, which we actually go over all of that in our course called Your Artistic Journey, which takes you from starting out to trying to reach your art goals, and it's geared towards hobby artists who want to find peacefulness in their art and to feel comfortable with what they're making and to be proud of what they're making. And But we do go over the fundamentals there, because even though if you're a hobby artist and you're doing it for relaxation and just your own enjoyment, you're going to have better results if you at least understand some of the basic principles and the foundations of art. So the only thing I got left to do is the skull. For this part of it, I'm just working on the characters, and then I'll have to make some decisions about the background and the lettering. I don't want to leave the background all white, but I haven't yet decided what I want to do with it. But I know I do want to break up all this white in the skull. And then the other thing you can use are these blending sticks, these colorless blenders. And if you go over the edge with this, it'll lighten it up and blend it into the white of the paper. Just kind of helps get rid of that hard edge. Or you can leave it. If you like the way the hard edge looks, you can leave it. Excuse me. It just depends on what you're going for. I'll do it both ways. If you go over it with the blender and it lightens it up too much, no big deal. You just go back over it with your marker again. The one thing you do need to keep in mind though is that if your paper's damp, so like I use this blender and it took a little bit too much away, when you go back over it, it's going to absorb into the paper a little bit because the paper's still wet. And that's the nice thing about the markers. You can go back and forth. You can darken stuff up. You can actually use this as kind of an eraser if you go outside of the line. Like right here, I can go over this with the blender, and most of the time it'll almost remove it completely. It'll for sure lighten it up. So if you go out of the lines, something like that's not a big deal because I'm not going to leave that white anyway, so it'll get covered up. But so that's it for that part of it. I need to figure out what color I want to do the letters. And then I need to decide what I want to do with the background. You can fill in the background with I wouldn't do it on this style, but you could do like brick walls. You could do checkerboards are nice for fillers, or you could just do some solid color. I could do a rainbow of colors. There's some different options here. So I'm gonna cut off the video and get my thoughts together, figure out what I want to do, and then I'll come back. Okay, we're in the home stretch for this. The only thing left to do is to color the letters, fill in the background, and then what I usually do is add some white over top with the white Jelly Roll pen just to add some highlights, break up this color a little bit. One thing I want to mention is that when you do add your white highlights, it works better if the marker is completely dry. If it's still damp and you go over top of it with this, it'll kind of soak into the paper a little bit. So good idea to just let your drawing dry out a little bit before using that. So I decided to do some yellows and greens for the lettering, and then I'm going to do purple for the background. I'm going to do mostly a light purple and maybe a little bit of dark purple just around the edges to sort of frame it a little bit. So this might be a good time to mention that you can use different brands of markers together. You can mix and match them. As long as they're all alcohol based, they'll blend together. So you don't have to worry about sticking with just one brand or not using them together in a piece. You can mix and match markers. It doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is I have this bright yellow, a green, and then it's like kind of a golden yellow. And the other thing you should know about the markers is that like this cap makes it look like it's a really bright fluorescent yellow, and it's not. It's just your basic yellow. It's bright, but it's not as fluorescent as what this makes it look. So again, I'm going to work in the same way that I do with everything. And again, this is how I like to work. If you're experimenting with some other ways, some different techniques, do whatever works for you. If you're not sure, if you've not tried something, go ahead and try doing it the same way that I do. And then as you get a little bit more comfortable, or maybe things don't seem right to you or whatever, then go ahead and try doing something different and experimenting a little bit. But the big thing is you want to get started. You need to do something. You don't want to be at a standstill. So that's why I explain how I do things. Certainly it's not because I think it's the only way or the best way or the right way. It's just my way. And I know that a lot of the struggles that people tend to have is getting started and taking those first steps. So my goal really is just to get you to take those first steps. And I'm not sure how this is going to look. This is something different from how I would normally work. And one thing I want to point out is that you can't be afraid to make bad art. And what I mean by this is I'm going to try doing this where I have, this is more of a brown color. And this is more of like, it's a lime green kind of a color. I typically wouldn't use these color combinations, but I wanted to just experiment a little bit with how it would look to have the yellow is the base, and then some green up here, green in the middle, and then back to the yellow, and then this golden brown color. I just wanted to play around with that a little bit and see how it looks. And if I don't love it, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. I tested out the colors on a piece of paper first on this little scrap card, just to see how the colors look together. And I was comfortable enough with it to take a shot and see what it looks like. You have to be willing to have something not turn out exactly the way you want it to, so that you can experiment and try new things and push yourself. Of course, if you're not interested in pushing yourself, then you don't need to do that. But for me, I like to have a sense of growth, even though I'm doing this for my own enjoyment. I want to feel like I'm improving. I want to feel like I'm not stuck in some kind of rut. I want to feel like I'm having a little bit of courage to try something different every now and then and experiment with different things. So the other thing I should mention when you're doing this type of the colors on your lettering is that you'll need to decide how you want the colors to line up. So I'm going to stay consistent all the way across. I personally don't like, so for example, where these lines overlap, this one's lower than that one. I did that intentionally. I don't like when they're even. I don't like the way it looks. So I intentionally make them different just because that's my personal preference. If you want yours to be consistent all the way across so that they line up and continue from letter to letter, then that's perfectly fine. That would be something that would be part of your style. if you chose to make that your thing and do it consistently. The other thing you can do is like with the eye, with the circle on top, I could do the green and the browns up there, or I could do the yellows, the green, and make it all one. I could treat it as two separate pieces, or I could treat it as one, if that makes sense. Again, that's just a personal preference. Normally what I would do is leave this yellow and then have the green here and this golden brown color down there. But because I'm in a mood to try some different things, I'm going to go ahead and treat these as two separate pieces. And I'm going to do the same thing up top here is what I'm going to do on the bottom. But you can do it either way. There's, like I said, there's really no right or wrong way. Most things with art is just personal preference, unless you're doing more technical and realistic drawings, then it's gonna matter. But if you're just having fun, like today, it's Saturday morning when I'm recording this, and I'm just having a nice, peaceful, relaxing day. So I'm not worrying about things being overly technical, and I tend to steer away from the technical drawings. I don't like having to use a ruler to put too much thought into what I'm doing. I like to just go with how I feel that day and just let it be relaxing. Okay, so there's not really a whole lot more that I can tell you about this, so I'm going to switch. I haven't started the L yet, so that's fine. I don't have to worry about anything drying out too soon. But I did want to show you what my thoughts were on how I want to do the purple. So I'm just going to go in and fill in all these background areas. And I'm going to use mostly this light purple, but right around the edges of the paper, I'm going to go with the darker. So I'm just going to fill it in. Then I'm going to switch to my darker one. And I'm just going to add a little bit right at the edge. And then go back in with my lighter color and sort of blend that out and smooth it a little bit. So that's kind of the look that I'm going for. So this is all going to be just, I'll show you real quick. This will just be the lighter color. I'm just going to fill that in solid with the lighter color. And then that's just going to stay just like that. I'm not going to use the darker color to go in for each section. I'm only going to do it around the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off, finish this up, and then I'm going to let it dry. I'll do the jelly roll, which I'll probably pop back on camera to show you how I go about using the highlights, because again, I don't get technical with it. I'm not doing it the correct way per se, but there's a way that I do it, my thought process, that keeps it just relaxing and something to not stress out about. So I'll come back for that. I'm going to finish up this letter doing it the same way as I did that one. I'm going to do the background colors in the way that I had just showed you. Then I'm going to let this dry for a little bit, and then I'll come back to do the white. So I will see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we're just adding the finishing touches to this. It's just about done. I colored in the background, doing it in the way that I explained a little bit ago. I went in with the white jelly roll and added some white in there. And the way I do my white is I just break up the color with the white. There's not a whole lot that goes into it. I do try to be somewhat consistent with how I'm doing it. So like the tops of her shoes where the light might be reflecting down, you probably might want to put a little more thought into it than what I do, but I just like the way the white looks. Like I said, I don't put a lot of thought into shadows and where the light source would be on these types of drawings. To me, it's just not that important for this style of art. Now, the other thing I want to do is use my black colored pencil to just add a little bit of shading behind where these letters overlap. And you can use color pencil with your markers. It works really well. The two work really well together. But I used to do this all the time and I kind of got away from it for a little bit. So I want to go back to trying it. I'm not sure why I quit doing it. I probably just got in a mood to try some different things. You know, all of this is part of the style and the look and what makes your art your art. But sometimes you want to change it up a little bit, and your style's going to change over time. It's always going to be evolving. And what your style is today might not be the same as tomorrow. You could go something completely different tomorrow and want to go down a different path. Maybe you see something that inspires you or whatnot. You could also use this for other parts of the drawing. That's not something I've ever done. I kind of try to picture what that would look like and to kind of give myself an idea of if I think I want to go that route or not. Right now I don't think that's what I want to do. Another thing that I do sometimes is I'll use a white colored pencil to add some highlights on the lettering. That works really well. It's not as bright as what the jelly roll does, but for something like this, the white's not going to be real bright anyway because of how light this yellow color is. And I'm probably doing this completely backwards because I'm right-handed and I'm going back over top of where I just put the white down. And this jelly roll pen does take a minute to dry, so I definitely should have worked left from right so I didn't smudge. I'm one of those people that can't talk and do things at the same time. So that's pretty much it. I had thought about going in and adding a little bit more shadows, maybe some gray or something in these insides, but I think I'm gonna skip that and call this done. So here is the finished drawing. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you found it useful. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. These graffiti drawing challenges are so much fun to do. That's why we have a new one every week over in the Facebook group. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and check out the Facebook group and leave us a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to get notified of future videos. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for stopping by and checking out the channel, and I will see you soon. Bye!